Welcome back, everybody, to another special episode of Team Psycosmos, where today we're going to ask and answer some key questions about our lives and your lives. So if you've ever wondered where does all this mythology and religious symbolism really come from? Where did people get these ideas for all these stories and all these metaphors?
Yes.
If you've ever wondered, is there something more to all these religious faiths than just the standard, very direct reading, very literal direct reading from their texts? Is it possible that there's other things out there in our world and beyond in the stars that in some way, shape, or form influence what's going on this planet?
We're here to answer all these questions for you in today's episode.
So today we're going to get into just a little general introduction on a very big topic, and that's astrology. Mm-hmm. Now, real quick, don't click away, because we're not talking about, your modern day hoity-toity at Thursday at 2 p.m. You're going to find the love of your life because of your sun sign.
Horoscope BS.
We're not going into that. We're talking about the real deal astrology, which really, the better phrase I think would be astronomy, but
yes,
they kind of took over and made it more sciencey.
Yes.
So we want to talk about the real astrology. Where did it come from? Why is it important? How old is it? What have people used it for, and why?
Yes. Wonderful.
Yes.
I guess the first place to start would be Egypt.
Well, Egypt is a great place to start, but if you really want to go all the way back, you got to go back all the way to Babylonia. The two biggest groups that are best known for their skills with astrology would have to be the Babylonians and this group called the Chaldeans. It could be the Chaldeans, however you want to pronounce it. But these two groups were particularly known for their ability to track what are called celestial bodies, so planets, stars, that sort of thing, across the night sky over long distances over long periods of time. And in addition to that, they were able to calculate out with very great degrees of accuracy when these planets and stars would be in specific positions in the skies, when they would retrograde, which is when they move back, how this would influence the seasons, how they could keep track of the coming changes in seasons and weather, and that sort of thing.
Yes. And it's super interesting because those cultures gave way to a lot of the stories that we hold very seriously now. Because eventually the Babylonians and the Chaldeans, how do you pronounce it?
I think I'm going to guess Chaldean, but I don't really know because I only see it written,
All right. We'll say it's the Chaldeans. The Babylonians and the Chaldeans eventually paved the way for the Sumerians, and the Sumerians had stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which eventually got turned into stuff like the
Noah's Flood, the Deluge. Yes. Very, very common story for cultures around the world to have some sort of thing where humanity can't get its stuff together, and God is very upset, so he smites down all the wicked people with a massive flood. But he normally comes down beforehand, and he finds like one super good dude, and he says, you're gonna basically rebuild everything for me because you're so awesome, unlike these other guys.
So basically all these very ancient cultures, you have to look back at the stories that they told and do some research on them, because they're essentially what paved the way for a lot of stories that we have today.
So going off that, in traditional astrology, which for the sake of argument, when we say something like that, we're just referring to astrology as pretty much as it was known before it became, I guess you could say, gimmicky, modern day horoscopy. So when it was more of a science, because it really was, the smartest people in history, a lot of them had at least a passing interest in astrology, and many of them were very educated on it. So these are people who are doctors, physicians, sages, philosophers, freaking kings, princes, lords, priests. All these people were really, really into this stuff because all of them realized it's really important to watch the sky for keeping track of time, for potentially predicting future events, and just for really, it gave them a really big understanding and a lot of a good place for insight into basically their situation on the earth.
Yes.
What they're looking at, what it all means, but not strictly in a religious sense, but in a philosophical and a spiritual sense as well.
Yes, for sure.
And so for them, they had traditionally 7 planets. And I'm putting air quotes around planets because when you look at the 7 traditional planets, 2 of them are the sun and the moon, which we know aren't technically a planet as modern science
They're
would define
basically
them.
the 7 celestial bodies that you can observe from our planet. It does not include
With just
Earth.
this.
With just your eye. So within the night sky, I know there's a lot of light pollution these days, but there are 7 main planets that you can visibly observe from our planet. And those 7 are the sun, the moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. These 7 planets also correlate with the 7 days of the week.
Exactly.
And that's actually where we get the names for them. Monday would be Moon Day. Tuesday, or in Spanish, Martes, Mars. Wednesday, Spanish or Latin, Miércoles, Mercury.
Mercury, haha.
Thursday, Thorsday,
Thursday.
Jupiter.
Yes.
Because Thor was Jupiter in Nordic mythology. Friday, Viernes, that's Venus. Saturday is Saturn's day. And
That's a really obvious one. But not as bad as the last one.
Sunday.
Who's that for?
I wonder. So those 7 planets are where we get the 7 days of the week from.
But there's more, because this is also why, if you've ever wondered why 7 is a magic number, this is one of the reasons why.
Yep.
It also pops up a lot in a bunch of scriptures and stuff.
Bunch of different cultures.
It appears in the Bible quite a few times, if I'm not
7
mistaken.
chakras.
7 chakras. Yep.
Yep.
It's and then also this is just a fun little fact. If you happen to go look up Saturn, you'll find that there's a specific number of groupings of rings of Saturn. 7.
There's 7 rings.
And
7 groups of rings.
If I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. Could be wrong.
Drop a comment down below if Rich is wrong.
The one of the Hebrew names for Saturn is I think it's Sheba.
Sheba, yeah.
Which is 7.
Yes, because it's the 7th planet observable from our sky.
Just interesting how these things work out and line up, you know.
Yeah.
So then, you know, I guess the question is now, so what?
Yeah.
So there's these 7 things that we can observe with the naked eye. Like, why are they important? Well, the real practical stuff they were using it for would be, like I said, to keep track of time, particularly over long stretches of time. So people like the Chaldeans, they were able to calculate with accuracy that today is still very impressive and very close. And they only had, you know, their brains and hand tools. They were able to calculate things like planets retrograding, which is when they, after like a long period of time, they'll move slightly back on their cycle and then continue on.
At least observable from our planet, it looks like they're moving back, but really what it is, it's when it is in conjunction with the planet. I think it's conjunction with the planet, and when they're moving around and we're moving around at a specific angle, it looks to us as though they're actually moving backwards. They're not, but it looks as though to us it is. And they believe that there was some kind of influence when it came to that. Especially since all 7 of these planets, if you're in a place where you don't have a lot of light pollution and you can visibly see the night sky, like they would have been back in the day, where they didn't have a lot of, you know, street lights and everything, and cities and everything else.
Skies must have been beautiful.
They must have been beautiful, and they are. I mean, if you go out to the middle of nowhere and you look up at the stars, it's glorious. It's very beautiful. But those 7 planets were known as the Wanderers because they, unlike the other stars in the sky, they were not locked into place. These 7 wandered all around. They had their own rotations. They wandered all throughout the sky. So this is where a lot of different stories came to be about these 7 different planets.
It's also why there's so many common stories of you go to Gnosticism with your archons. You go to Hinduism with their planetary arrangements, and they also have, I think it's 9 is a really important number for them because they count the ascending and the descending node.
Yes.
Which, if I'm remembering correctly, is a point where the moon's orbit crosses the
sun's elliptical or something like that. I think they called them Retu and Ketu or Ritu and Ketu or something like that. Yeah.
So you got that. You got different archangels in both the Christian and the Islamic, and then also the Judaic tradition.
Well, it's also, I mean, you go to church and they're cardinals, deacons, monsignors, which is just
all astrology.
Moon star, minister, mini star. It basically, many of these religions are based off of astrological interpretations.
And because of the fact that those stars wander, as you say, people in history have applied, I guess you could say, somewhat personal characteristics to the planets.
Yeah, of course.
So when they talk about the planets, a lot of times they talk about them as being governors. That's a really popular term, or lords. So they're always, a lot of the time they're below God or the creator of the cosmos. So it's either the super god or the what's called like a lot of times the demiurge. So they're just the guy who created the physical universe. A lot of the time, they're called lords or masters or wanderers or governors, because when people were looking at this and trying to figure it out, they noticed that these planets essentially, in a metaphorical way, did whatever they wanted.
Right.
Whereas the other stars were very ordered, and they stuck to their place, and they didn't step on anybody's toes. But these guys could do whatever they want, so that's why they're governors.
Right.
And then from there, you have different cultures assigning different hierarchies.
Right.
A lot of the time, Saturn and the Sun are the two big guys.
Yep.
The Sun makes perfect sense, and whatever. Saturn's a little weird.
Yep.
But from what I can gather, it's because one, he's one of the biggest.
Yep.
And two, he takes the longest amount of time
30 years
to complete
a cycle
an
around
orbit
the
around the sun.
Yep, 30 years. And
So
actually,
he's the king.
and that's Sauron in the Lord of the Rings is Saturn, and that's where we get that terminology for him, the Lord of the Rings, because he is the one that has the longest and the largest ring around the sun. So he's the Lord of the Rings, because out of every other planet, he takes the longest. That's where.
And he has the rings.
Yeah,
literally.
That's where Tolkien got the name for Sauron. It's actually named after Saturn.
Know that.
Yeah,
That's
there you
really
go.
cool.
Yeah, yeah.
The more you know.
The more you know.
So yeah, and so everything relates back in some way to these planets and to this astrological system. And
But now wait, Rich.
yes,
Wait a second. Now that's all said and good, but clearly in today's modern society, where we are heavily based off of science, none of these planets could possibly have any sort of influence on us.
or could they?
Or could they?
You see, the ancients did a lot of the ancients have been mischaracterized over the years with history, unfortunately. So you get to a sort of point where a lot of people think that the further back in time you go, the more superstitious as a whole people got everywhere, no matter where you were, including the really smart people.
Yes.
That's not really true. And more so than that, there's this common misconception that there's, I guess you could say, the fantastical version of these stories.
Yeah.
So like in these fantastical versions, like, maybe Mars has a war with Venus and it results in like some fire raining down Earth or something like that.
Like Ares
I'm
and
just
Aphrodite.
spitballing.
Yeah.
So people would read a story like that, and even to the smartest people of the time, they would say this is what those people believe. That's not the case.
Right.
Metaphors have been around for a while. People are perfectly capable of understanding and writing in metaphors.
I understand.
So
Yeah,
it's this weird sort of arrogance,
kind
I
of a
think, of a lot of people today.
Oh, for sure. But we do want to get into the science of it, because that is basically what a lot of people base their fundamental materialistic perception, their physical perception of reality in the world. So there are a lot of very credible scientific theories that actually correlate with not only the way that the planets and the stars influence us on this Earth, but also how the ancients perceived them influencing us.
What, Matt? There's no way the ancients knew about solar wind. Or did they?